Okay, Harry, here we go. This is from Bayport over in the secondary part. I wasn't by the fishing pier. I was over by that aluminum platform that I've shown. Um, it's just like a little secondary park. And my camera was down low, but I was also up on the bank. So, I mean, I could average it out at about 6 feet. I didn't actually have my cell phone or when you're down in these areas where I'm at, a lot of times it's very hard to measure how high your camera is, especially if you're up on the bank, due to the bushes that are there, the weeds, and the bugs sometimes eat you alive when you're standing down in the sand. So sometimes I move up on the bank, but I do leave my camera down low, just so I can get like a 6 foot, perspective. And then when I'm at Pine Island, I'm down like trying to get at 28 inches, and I've even done that here in this spot on a low tide. But I even say in here with the audio, the original audio, and I'll leave that little part in. You can hear what I say, and then you'll see later on where I'm at.
Let me just show full zoom. From Bayport Secondary Park, where the aluminum ramp is. But not at the very end where you can see the Bayport ramp, and not at the other end, about in the middle.
All right, I did speed these up 5 times the speed, and then in a couple of places where I had done, I don't know, like less than a minute actual video, I left on there. Um, I don't know why. Maybe I turned my camera off to reset it, or I have no idea why there was like a 40-second video twice in here, something like that. Um, just the way the camera's set up, sometimes it does a 15-minute video, and sometimes it splits them in half. Um, Depending on what setting I got with this P900 or P1000, it does some really weird things. But this wasn't long after I actually got the well, it was about a year after I got the P1000. But you can obviously see that right there where everything's blobbed up at the bottom of the rack. That's all the what I call the information all jammed into one little spot there. It's all being compressed, compacted. And what I try to tell people is take a mirror and put it on a little angle. And right here, if I was to actually put some of the other video on that I took earlier than this, you would actually see this water is being cut off at around that halfway marker, which means that there's about 1.5 miles within the visible water line and the bird rack. And you can tell that it's highly distorted after you get past that visible water line. So I mean, I don't even know how anybody could think that. All right, I sped it back up. I don't know how anybody could even think that that is actually the horizon itself. Obviously, if you go back to some of my other videos, especially, well, I think it was titled "In Search of the True Horizon" or something like that. In Search of the Horizon, and there was some pictures in there that I took that did show the water above the Bayport bird rack and boats that you could actually see sitting on it. And that's what I mean by, we think it might be just this like a layer, but it's not. It's actually, sometimes it's being compressed, and then sometimes like everything, all the water beyond this rack is just in that mirror, so it's just mirroring everything all the way, if you want. And again, don't forget that this is compressed, and that's why it's a lot of times it's hard to explain a lot of this stuff. You know as well as I do, man. It can get confusing because now watch them start separating at the bottom, and the one at the bottom is just a mirror image of the one at the top. But again, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's two more cross member beams all compressed in there somewhere, all in that little spot. So again, you know, it's like the mirroring edge is changing as the angle of the light changes. Maybe also too the temperature's changing out there. Obviously, it's a windy day, and you can see that the waves are much higher, and the waves also do block out stuff, at a certain angle. I mean, anybody that watches that show, The Deadliest Catch, where they're out, crab fishing, they show you low perspective, footage from of these big ships, and 1 minute they're there, and the next minute they're gone. I mean, or half the ship disappears beyond that huge waves. Of course, those are huge waves, but even these small waves will do the same thing on an object farther out. And what it is it's the first. It's the first resolvable wave that actually causes this blockout of objects that are further back, especially if it's being compressed downward. Okay, and altogether this was like an hour and like 15 minutes, I think it was, that I tried to pack in here. I was going to do 10 times the speed, but when I played back some of it, it was like, ugh. I said, I don't know if you could even make anything out of that. And then too, I'm not, a lot of times when I'm at this same height, you see this little thing off to the right of the bird rack. That's a pole. It's a pole that sits up right next to it. And I'm pretty sure the marker to the left of the rack is like number 1. It's called, it's got a number 1 on it because it's the first one after the Bayport rack once you get in the channel. It's the channel marker number 1. And then they get bigger on the way back to the shore. Again, here you can see me adjusting the compensation exposure in here to see if it makes much of a difference. And of course I do the zoom back, so you can pretty much see basically where my camera is kind of located. I mean, I don't spin it all around where you can see, but behind me is that ramp that I usually film next to. And this could be in that. There's a couple of little openings, and I think this was in the one little opening that I don't film from a lot, but it turned out to be a good spot to get in because of the wind. I had a wind break right here. That's trying to get out of the wind sometimes when, especially if it's coming directly at me, it's almost impossible. But when it's coming from one side or the other, out of the north or the south, sometimes I can find me a nice little wind break and get in there. Again, we're not going to zoom back in here, speed it back up. It kind of adjust my camera a little bit. But when you start watching them and comparing these to each other, you start seeing this pattern of this mirroring. And like I was saying, it's like putting a little it's like putting a mirror at the edge of a table, or further back, say halfway down the table, and putting it on a little angle, and then putting something at the end of the table. You'll see how it cuts it off and mirrors it above. And I got a couple. I found another one that I'm going to do too for you that I think is pretty cool, because it actually shows the a major mirroring below this bird rack. And I do believe I'm up on a higher perspective too, which is pretty wild. Um, but it was also a rainy day, so that might have had something to do with it. And that's what I say about what actually is causing this mirroring. And I do think it's water. I mean, the amount of evaporation rate that's occurring, um, and the humidity that's in the air. When you got a lot of humidity, man, it just really blocks everything out. I mean, it is a curtain, right? Seeing rain when it starts coming down, it blocks your whole horizon out, right? Well, imagine it being lit up by the sun too, by the light. Well, it's the same thing. It's just getting right here. It's just illuminated, and that illuminated humidity is the curtain that covers everything and blocks all the water beyond this visible water line. That visible water line, obviously, and you know as well as I do, it is just a perspective. Um, well, what are they calling it? The perspective horizon, or the you know, God dang it, I can't remember what everybody's calling it, but it doesn't matter. I know it's a false horizon. It's not the real horizon, because the real horizon, like I said, by putting a level on my camera and using that virtual horizon, I can come pretty close to whereabouts my eye level is. Now, is it precise? No, but it's pretty darn good, because if you go by a theodolite, it does show that it's higher and it looks like the horizon drops, but this is why, because it's actually showing you the perceived horizon, and not the actual true horizon. Plus, it doesn't zoom in, so when you zoom back off of something, everything seems to drop. So, of course, their device, to me, is not accurate enough, even a surveyor, because they can only go out to so far, and then they realize that this is what happens. So then all of a sudden they're having this big drop, right? Because if they account for it, they'll make a parking lot, slope down way more than it should. Why? Because it apparently looks that way, right? It looks like the horizon's, down much lower than what it actually is. So, if they were trying to make something pretty flat and level, it would wind up being all screwed up. So that's why they do it in short increments, in my opinion. And again, when this thing is not mirroring, and I do have pictures of the Bayport rack not mirroring, and you can see it kind of rising now too, getting closer to the top of the screen. Now, people would say, well, that's looming, it's stretching. I don't care what you call it, but it's getting back to, well, number one, it's being displaced. It was being compressed down. So now it's just putting itself back in its proper place. Same way with that horizon. It gets compressed too, but we can't see the true horizon right now. We're just seeing a false horizon, as you well know. Harry, and that's why I like watching your videos, because you give me that high perspective, um, and that you can't beat, because everybody's doing either low or well, some people do real high ones, and real high ones, like with yours, you have that tower, and then you have the cliff beside it that man, does that give you a much better perspective of what's going on out there on the horizon, especially when, you said their theodolite or their survey equipment showed the horizon above that tower. And I think it is above the tower because when you did the sunrise ones, that was above the tower. That is actually the horizon. But again, it's a big veil that hangs down and blocks us out from actually seeing it. It's all that haze. It's the pollution. It's it's the illuminated water molecules, the humidity, everything. That's why that's a big question in the flat Earth community. They want to say that it's something else because you shouldn't be able to see that, but because of perspective, I think you should. Um, but you're never going to be able to see anything above your eye level. And your tower, and then you saying that their equipment showed. I think you said you got it from Rufus, or whatever the heck his name is. Um, I think it was accurate. I actually think that was accurate, and that is where it's at. And everything that you've seen in your sunrise footage, when you've seen anything that went into that, that was just a mirror image, a reflection of what was going on above. And where you had the half loop sun, that was just like a mirror image of what was actually going on above that you could not see because of the brightness of the sun. It's weird. I want to say that it's kind of like um, a miraged mirror image, or a lens flare of the sun. Because I've seen them in some of my videos. Um, when I'm, when I get a lens flare, sometimes it's a mirror image of the sun itself. I left this in here just to I thought it was pretty neat. I didn't zoom in all the way, but you know, this is another thing that people say, that they question if is the moon illuminated by the sun or if it's self-illuminated. Um, yeah, it could be either. Um, it it really doesn't matter to me, but I mean, biblically speaking, they'll tell you if you don't accept that it's it's illuminated by itself because God said that. I mean, because it says it in the Bible. Well, no, I think we need to look at it in a different perspective than just what the Bible says, by observation upon observation. Now, if you take a picture of the moon, um, which I'm sure maybe you've got some, I got some, where you see the lit side of the moon, and then you see the unlit side of the moon glowing. Okay, now a glober would say that well, see there, that's the light bending around uh, the the ball. Well, if that was so, why can't we see on the other side of the curvature of the moon? When we zoom really in on it hard, why aren't we able to see around the back side? Because due to refraction, because refraction is bullshit, right? And the moon actually shows it. Those pictures show it because the illuminated part of the moon, the side that's facing the sun, is actually puffed out compared to the side that isn't illuminated. So again, is the brightness of that sun reflecting off that side of the moon, blocking out the actual natural moonlight itself? Could be. Just a thought. All right, I'm going to end it here. Uh, just let me know what you think. I just made this for you, and like I said, I got another one I'm going to make. I think it's also pretty good. All right, talk to you later. See you.